Hello, this is Tennyson E Stead, writer and director of Quantum Theory, founder of 8-Sided Films. And right now, because I'm so heavily involved in the process of getting Declassified, our web show, through pre-production, which means getting all the things we need to actually shoot. And right now what that means is getting the costume built, getting the set built. Well, we've met a lot of new production designers, and we met a lot of new costume designers through this process. And I'd like to talk about how I make the decision regarding who I'm going to work with, because picking your people is one of the biggest things you can do to prevent shows from falling apart. And it's one of the biggest things you can do to prevent waste and trouble on set, and also, to prevent the show from being less than what it should be. Everything comes from the collaborations and the people that you work with. And your eye for those people has to be more than you're smelling a vibe. It has to be more than, a tone that you're trying to set. We've talked about tone in previous blogs. I won't get into it here. If you want to find out my thoughts on tone, go watch Smoking Hollywood, the fourth episode of Smoking Hollywood, and then do the opposite. But before we get into that, I just will briefly mention that Declassified is a web series of found footage, archival footage from the government that's being released to the public from the 60s and 70s about these massive scientific projects that were undertaken during the height of atomic power, and the height of the growth of our government's relationship with defense contractors, and the people that are stuck in the middle of these programs who are sort of forced to make them work even though they're insane. And the first season is going to be the footage released from a project called Project Icarus, which, as the Apollo program was starting to fall apart in the late 70s, and they realized the funding was going to get cut and the shuttle program wasn't going to do a whole lot for NASA because it was only low orbit flights that they were buying with the money. There was a little bit of panic, at least in the context of this story. And they had a couple of Saturn V's lying around, and they had defense contractors working on nuclear rocketry, so they thought, why don't we just to find out if we can do it, why don't we take one of these moon rockets, pack it with a whole lot of extra life support, pull two of the seats out, just fill it up with life support, and just see if we can get a person to Saturn's moon of Titan. And the sort of double whammy is that not only is this person going to spend 8 years in space, but there's no chance they're coming back, because they can maybe get a person there, but they for sure can't get them back. So this person's on a one-way ticket to see if they can stick the landing, basically, and prove, that NASA wants this, or the actual agency that's doing this work is called the Bureau of Applied Defense Development, which is going to be the agency responsible for all the projects within the Declassified web series. But the Bureau of Applied Defense Development wants this in their back pocket in case the opportunity comes back to sell some defense contractors on some other heavy stuff. And it's like, well, we'll have this footage, and then we can pull it out and get them to sign a non-disclosure statement and show them something that'll really blow their mind, and they'll want to come in and do other crazy stuff with us. So, to be honest, it's entirely politically motivated. It's not a good idea. We just don't have the tech to do it right, so we're going to do it cheap and dirty, is the whole plan. And of course, it just doesn't go as well as it could. They're relying on luck, and luck is not in their favor, so it comes down to how adept is the astronaut at keeping his craft in shape for those 8 years without any new tools, without any resupplies, and how good is he at keeping himself in shape, And the answer is not perfect, and then maybe it needs to be perfect for it to work, so it gets messy. It's an interesting web show. Anyways, Gerard Marzilli's playing the astronaut. His name's Wick Pierce, and we've been working on getting the costume done, getting his flight suit built, and there's some parts that actually have to be built because the replicas for this stuff are like thousands of dollars, so we're just going to build it from scratch. And probably we'll find out from the costume designer. And literally the camera angle is something we put a picture of, but it's just a camera of him, just literally in the capsule. So there's even less space behind her, probably about the same amount of space that you're seeing behind me. We have to sort of fill that with space capsule. And so it's not a huge expense, it's not a huge build, but we still need someone to come in, design it, build the space, make it look real enough so you go, yeah, okay, that's a spaced man. I believe it, you know? It has to look archival, it has to look like something NASA would have really done. That's the key to the whole thing. So as we talk to people and as we explain what we're doing and look for people who are seeing this as a unique challenge, what criteria do we use? And it's the same regardless of the budget. It's the same if we're doing quantum theory for just under $1 million, or if we're doing, you know, a family adventure that's 50 million, or, you know, a big science fiction epic for hundreds of millions of dollars. You want people who have the craftspersonship to deliver the level of excellence that challenges the people around them to step up their game. It's just like sports. You want everybody taking things to the next level so that everybody else has to always be trying to catch up. You want everybody afraid that they're the worst person on the team. And the best way to do that is to make sure that everybody you hire is the best person on the team. And so, you know, you have to get into the show in a way that reveals that side of people very quickly. And so I try to avoid, in conversations with actors, I try to avoid throwing out big ideas as the things that are supposed to inspire them. I try to avoid talking about the art so much as the craft. I want people to look at the people around them as the best reason to join this production. Because if they feel too threatened to actually sign on, that tells me a lot right there. And you know, and when I talk about the advantage of the work, I talk about the work itself. I talk about the things that have to get done. I talk about the mountain of things that have to get done. I make it very clear the scope of what we're doing. And then I get into all the details that I think could be influential and important. You know, not in a way that tells people how to do their job, because that's also not appropriate, but in the sense that I'm highlighting needs that need to be filled. You know, I talk about, in other words, with Declassified, for example, I talk about the inherently procedural nature of the show. I tell a designer exactly what I just told you, which is that the show has to look like NASA built it. You know, and yes, the camera footage is going to be distressed, and yes, it's been transmitted across space, and it's not clean footage at all, so there's going to be room for error. But in terms of the shapes that we're seeing, and in terms of the textures that we're seeing, and in terms of all the things that come through in the moments of clarity that we get, it's got to be built like the way it would have been built. It has to look like it was built by engineers in the 70s. You know, it can't look operatic. It can't look like Doctor Who, because then we know it's not archival footage. We lose the drama that comes from questioning whether or not we believe what we're seeing. You know, and that's part of the fun of the show, is maybe we did do something like this. But if we make it too splashy, then we lose that. You know, and when it comes to design work of any kind, you know, the actors are undertaking an action, usually in my shows, that beggars credibility. You know, Gerard is going to be giving monologues as transmissions back to Earth, and we're supposed to believe that he's talking into a headset and just hoping desperately that his words make it all the way back to Earth, and that in several hours or several days, depending on how far he is away, that someone else will speak back to him. It's a lot to ask, and of an audience to just buy into that. So one of the things that we can do to give Gerard the extra credibility that the situation needs is provide him with a context that lends credibility to that claim. You know, in something like quantum theory, the movie's a lot more fun. The things the actors are doing are inherently a little bit less realistic. Okay, but it still has to look like they did them. It can't look like a designer came in and did it for them. Because the second you send that message, then the audience gets to take a break from the stakes. So you want to share that kind of information. You know what I'm saying? If you're talking to a composer, you want to talk about the themes that you want communicated in your ear because they're not on the screen and they can't be on the screen. Whether it's the internal monologue of the actor and the things that are going on emotionally in that actor that they're hiding from the other people in the scene that you want to leak in through their ears, or whatever's going on. You want the composer to come in with something different. So talk about the craft, talk about the level of excellence that people are bringing to the show, the level of detail and specificity that other content creators on the show are providing. Talk about the work that other people have done on the show and how clear and how specific it is, right? And then tell them what you need the design to actually do, but don't tell them what it looks like. You know, or if it's a composer, don't tell them what it sounds like. Let them figure. They know what it's supposed to sound like. You know, they'll figure it out. That's their job. If it's a DP, don't tell him. Don't give the DP camera positions. Let the DP find the camera positions, unless you need to block it out or you have a relationship with your DP where that's just part of your process. But check in before you do that. Ask if that's what you should be doing, because at the end of the day, it is their job. That's their craft to know these things. You should hire the DP who can find the camera positions that are going to make your show better. That's what you should do. And then, you know, rely on them for that. So rather than talk about, oh, this show's going to be like nothing anybody has ever seen, and it's got these big ideas, and think about the conspiracy thing, and think about how cool that is, and it's not useful to you in terms of figuring out who you need to be working with. Even with actors, it's not useful. You know, if I was casting this project, if I didn't have Gerard Marzilli already on it, I'd be talking to them about how finding the movement and the voice work that convinces me that this person was raised in the 50s and 60s and is now an adult in the 70s. How that work needs to be there, and how the military training needs to be there visually, and how those things need to be so automatic and so streamlined that they do not detract from the emotional distress of the situation with the level of specificity that the character himself is experiencing it. Because it would be very easy to do the whole thing grumbly and grrr and just, you know, get but that's not what's happening here. This man is disintegrating. Like, and not in subtle ways, but also not in vague ways. He's not a caricature of a man losing his mind. He's an actual person that we put in a space pod and sent to Titan for 8 years. And he's trying to keep it glued together. His job is to get to Titan, land, right? Perform whatever experiments. That's actually his job. So you need an actor that's going to come in and find the ways of keeping himself glued together and create for himself all the problems that character's having that are fighting him every step of the way. And when it becomes so specific that the actor, and clear and also automatic, that the actor can focus on keeping himself together and getting the job done, and all the rest of that stuff is there. It's a lot to ask, you know, and the actor who starts talking to you about tone when you're having that kind of discussion needs to go. That's not the person you need. So bring it back down to basics. When you're trying to figure out who you want to work with, don't talk about the art of it, talk about the craft of it. Get into, on the one hand, the level of craftspersonship that everybody else in the show is providing, and give them the chance to respond to that. Talk about the overall challenges, craftsperson-wise, that the show presents, and then talk about the specific needs that you have for that person, and find out what they have to offer on that front, and then dig into their portfolio and look for the things specifically that you need. Don't worry if it's impressive, don't worry if it's not. Look for the things that you need them to be able to do. And if those things are there, maybe that's somebody you can work with. And then from there, you look for professional habits. Were they on time to the meeting? Professionalism is the other big thing. So, I've reached the point of rambling, but that's what we look for. I probably can't understate professionalism. I'm sorry if I glossed over that, but in fact, I should have a whole separate developmental breakdown on the necessity importance of professionalism. So I'm going to get off this blog and write down that I have to do that. And in the meantime, I want you guys to have a good evening. Take good care. Bye-bye.